and welcome to UC Today. I'm Susie Harrison, Senior Content Editor, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Garth Landers, who is Director of Global Product Marketing at Theta Lake. So welcome, Garth.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right, so let's start our conversation. How has the shift to cloud-based voice platforms transformed how IT and or UC teams approach compliance?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things at play here. You mentioned two different stakeholders, and I think if we look at UC teams and UC leaders that are responsible for enabling cloud voice and all of the great things that UCaaS and contact centers can do, in addition to voice, is they've been challenged often by restrictions on adoption of new platforms because of the compliance challenges associated with adopting cloud-based platforms and all of these different features. Because from a compliance perspective, having to review and identify and detect risk in a newer, larger volume of different content types. In the past, maybe compliance teams were just responsible for email and voice, and not to minimize that may have been enough. Now there's a whole new plethora of capabilities, and that includes the many different use cases for cloud voice. So UC teams have seen people maybe putting a damper on adoption of new capabilities, including voice. With IT, it's a little bit different. With IT, they may have had really responsibilities for voice archives, email archives, almost a siloed approach to different content types. And now as they're embracing this sort of cloud transformation, they have to make choices about how they're going to manage compliance infrastructure. And that's moving to the cloud. Much like the voice systems that we're all used to are embracing the cloud, the compliance systems are. So they're looking at and identifying new partners, new solutions. They're figuring out what to do with legacy data. It's an amazing transformation. So the two go hand in hand. As organizations make the decision to embrace cloud voice, they're also faced with the compliance challenges of figuring out what's the best way to address this. And as we'll see, I think, in our discussion, it goes beyond voice. There's a lot going on with the platforms that we're using today.
And I think picking up on that compliance piece, we're seeing a more mature, perhaps more stringent regulatory environment. What are the primary compliance challenges that organizations are facing when transitioning to cloud-based communications?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. And, we've seen a number of regulatory fines, often involving unauthorized, unsanctioned communications, sometimes involving voice, sort of shadow IT approaches towards voice communication. And the primary compliance challenges organizations face is the associated growth of applications, features. When we talk about cloud voice, it encompasses a lot of different use cases. You may have whatever you're doing from your mobile device, right? And that could be, it could be your Teams voice, it could be your Zoom voice, it could be Cisco, it could be RingCentral, and then it could be, you have your contact center applications, and then you might have, chat applications that use chat and file sharing and other things. So there's a wide spectrum of use cases that organizations have to plan for. And I think the challenge that they face is that, unlike the past, where you could take sort of a one-size-fits-all approach and put everything into an on-premise repository, and maybe you were just looking at capturing a few select users and their voice communications, you're looking at just anything can be voice now. The virtual meeting that we're using today, voice enabled. Obviously, we could move the discussion to another application later. You've got voicemail, you've got chat, you've got in-meeting chat. So all of these things that accompany, and video for certain as well, accompany voice, also add to the pressure and the duty that regulated organizations have to maintain a really robust record-keeping environment. That is, that they're capturing this data, maintaining it, retaining it for regulatory purposes, whatever that number of years typically is, that they're supervising those communications, that they're able to review them and identify potential risk. So that, is another challenge in that, again, the data volume, the breadth of voice communications that we're having, the need to go through and review those probably exceeds most of the human manpower that we have in our organizations today. So there's many different challenges there.
And how can organizations ensure that their voice communication practices are not only meeting those current regulatory standards, but also future-proof?
Yeah, taking that future-proof approach really means that you're choosing a technology partner often for a duration, for a long term, right? Because your regulatory obligations aren't going to go away if you're in an industry like financial services. And so what's going to change will be the types of communications. Again, we talked about the wide spectrum of voice communications, but all of the accompanying applications that may not be as widely adopted today may be tomorrow. So you need, for example, whiteboards, great example. Work management systems are something that are increasingly popular and are text-based and accompany all of the things we do with our customers and partners and colleagues and coworkers. So taking a future-proof approach means really choosing a partner that is built for the duration, that works with a number of different communications types, can scale, can support all of the different modes of communication, multi-channel, in terms of voice, video, textual communications, dynamic visual content like whiteboards, and really being flexible, not being sort of rigid and tied to a monolithic architecture. That's the challenge that organizations are facing. We talked about in our first question, right? They're moving from sort of these siloed repository-based efforts where it's really about just storing the data, not really gathering all of the meaningful intelligence that you need to glean. And that might not only be just for regulatory purposes, it might be for customer service, training environments and learning and things like that, and extrapolating and getting, identification and patterns around your customer trends. So, that future-proof aspect really means taking actionable insights into all of these different content types as well.
And I think that future-proofing piece also aligns with these developing technologies, which comes on to what do you think the role of AI and machine learning will play in enhancing the compliance and operational capabilities of UC systems? And how do you think buyers should factor this into their decision making?
Yeah, no conversation in 2024 would be complete without a discussion around AI, right? So this one is no different. We talked about that volume of communications, and we sort of hinted at the answer here a little bit in talking about AI. There's no way that compliance team professionals, legal teams, all of those folks on sort of the regulatory side of the ledger are going to be able to keep pace. And that's a lot of the fear, right? There's a fear that we can't adopt these communications because we just can't keep pace. It's just far too explosive, too much volume, exponential growth. It's like compound interest, right? The content just expands over time. So AI and specifically areas like machine learning are really designed and should be, at Theta Lake, we put a strong emphasis on this about our ability not just to integrate at the content level, at the API level with, Zoom and RingCentral and Microsoft and literally hundreds of other vendors, but again, have that, AI and machine learning based capability to meaningfully extract and identify patterns and learn over time about, potential risks and hazards and policy violations, so that humans can't just do that by simply reading and eyeballing all of that. They might do things like random sampling and use lexicon-based approaches to hope to find the proverbial needle in the haystack. But that's really just a best effort, right? When you're doing random sampling, you're showing and providing evidence to auditors that you made that best and reasonable effort. With artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing, you can identify an image in a conversation, in a video like we're having today, where something, a policy violation is occurring, or you can, find examples of someone providing a potential bribe or gift that violates policy violation. So there's all sorts of things you can do with artificial intelligence. I think pertaining to voice, one of the challenges organizations fall into is that, we've heard a lot about transcription services recently and how transcription has really greatly improved and can really reasonably identify, and put together the construct of an audio conversation into text. That's true, and there's certainly evidence of that, right? We see that in all of the meeting platforms we're using today. But from a regulatory compliance perspective, that's often not the case. Those sort of ideal conditions that have been produced almost in a lab can't account for a loud trading floor or someone having a conversation in a tube or a subway with a lot of background noise, right? You're not going to pick up everything in a transcript. What artificial intelligence can do is really help. First of all, you want to have those really strong transcription services like Theta Lake does. And then you want to layer in and accompany that artificial intelligence and machine learning based application that can identify patterns in the transcript. So AI is here to stay, and from a compliance and regulatory standpoint, it really helps organizations scale their efforts and take on that, that really exponential growth that we see in content today.
And what are some of the sort of more common challenges that you think UC buyers could anticipate on in interoperability with existing systems, and how can they be mitigated?
Yeah, I think, it's not really when we look at the buyer's perspective on what we see, obviously all of these platforms operate differently and they provide different, though comparable, sets of functionality. The challenge for the compliance buyer and the UC buyer that's looking to be compliant is that a lot of the legacy or heritage compliance offerings just weren't built for supporting the platforms that are available today. They look at everything perhaps as an email, and or they might not have been built for voice at all. So they can't really capture things like emojis or likes and reactions or embedded images. So that's a real challenge.
Great. Well, I think there's so much that's going to be happening in this space, and of course we'll be tracking it on UC Today. Thank you, Garth from Theta Lake, for joining us today, and thank you to our viewers for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe, and stay tuned at uctoday.com for more news like this. Thank you, and thank you, Garth.
Great. Thank you for having me.